to tell you about one of history's most notorious unsolved cases, a story that begins in the autumn of 1888 in London's East End, where the fog rolled thick through narrow cobblestone streets and the smell of human misery hung in the air like a shroud. This is the story of Jack the Ripper, a name that would become synonymous with terror and mystery, though it was never the name of any man the police ever caught. Whitechapel in 1888 was a place where hope went to die. The Industrial Revolution had created unprecedented wealth for some, but for the thousands crammed into this corner of London, it meant overcrowding, poverty, and desperation. Lodging houses offered beds for 4 pence a night, and those who couldn't afford even that slept rough in doorways and alleys. Women, many of them immigrants fleeing poverty in their homelands, often turned to prostitution as their only means of survival. These were the forgotten people of Victorian London, invisible to the wealthy until something unspeakable happened to make their suffering impossible to ignore. The first murder that would later be attributed to Jack the Ripper occurred on August 31, 1888, though at the time, nobody knew they were witnessing the beginning of something unprecedented. Mary Ann Nichols, a 43-year-old woman who had been drinking earlier that evening, was found dead on Bucks Row around 3:40 in the morning. Her throat had been cut twice, and there were deep wounds to her abdomen. The police constable who discovered her body initially thought she might still be alive, but examination revealed the horrific truth. What made this different from other violent deaths in Whitechapel was the precision of the cuts, suggesting someone with anatomical knowledge had wielded the knife. 8 days later, on September 8th, Annie Chapman's body was discovered at 29 Hanbury Street. She was 47 years old and, like Nichols, had been making her living on the streets. Chapman's murder was even more brutal than the first. Her throat was cut, her abdomen opened, and her intestines had been placed over her left shoulder. Most disturbing of all, her uterus had been removed with what the examining physician called surgical precision. The killer had arranged personal belongings near her feet in a deliberate display, suggesting a ritualistic element to the crime that chilled investigators to the bone. The double murder of September 30th marked the killer's most audacious night. Elizabeth Stride was found at 1 a.m. in Dutfield's yard, her throat cut but her body otherwise unmarked. Investigators believed the killer had been interrupted before he could complete his ritual mutilation. Less than an hour later, Catherine Eddowes was discovered in Mitre Square. Her throat was cut, her abdomen opened, and her face was mutilated. The killer had removed her left kidney and part of her uterus, taking them away as trophies. On a wall near the body, someone had written in chalk, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." The police erased this graffiti before dawn, fearing it would incite anti-Semitic violence in an area already seething with ethnic tensions. 3 weeks after the double murder, the killer sent what became known as the From Hell letter to George Lusk, chairman of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. Along with the letter, written in an educated hand, came half of a human kidney preserved in wine. The writer claimed it was from Catherine Eddowes and that he had fried and ate the other half. The kidney was examined by physicians who confirmed it was human and showed signs of disease consistent with Eddowes' condition. This was the most credible of the many letters received by police and newspapers, though its authenticity remains debated to this day. The final canonical murder occurred on November 9th in Mary Kelly's room at 13 Miller's Court. Kelly was 25 years old and pregnant, though this detail would be lost in the horror of what was done to her. Unlike the previous murders committed on the street, this one took place indoors, giving the killer privacy and time. The result was his most savage work. Kelly's body was so extensively mutilated that she could only be identified by her hair and eyes. Her heart had been removed and was never found. The scene was so disturbing that seasoned police officers refused to enter the room, and the crime scene photographs, when they were eventually taken, were considered too graphic for public viewing. The investigation was unprecedented for its time. Inspector Frederick Aberline led the ground investigation, while Chief Inspector Donald Swanson coordinated from Scotland Yard. They employed new forensic techniques, including crime scene photography and detailed measurements. They interviewed hundreds of witnesses, followed up thousands of tips, and pursued leads across London and beyond. The investigation files grew to include over 2,000 pages of reports, witness statements, and correspondence. Yet despite this massive effort, they never made an arrest that led to conviction. The press coverage was unlike anything London had seen before. Newspapers competed to publish the most sensational headlines and gruesome details. The name Jack the Ripper came from a letter sent to the Central News Agency on September 27, signed with that moniker. Whether written by the killer or a journalist seeking to sell papers, the name stuck and became part of the legend. The media attention created a feedback loop of fear and fascination that gripped not just London but the entire world. For the first time, a serial killer had become an international celebrity. The public response was complex and revealing of Victorian society's contradictions. While the wealthy wrung their hands over the moral decay of the East End, they also devoured every gruesome detail in their newspapers. Social reformers used the murders to highlight the desperate conditions in Whitechapel, arguing that such violence was inevitable in such circumstances. The murders led to increased funding for street lighting and police patrols, improvements that might have happened decades earlier if the victims had been from better neighborhoods. Theories about the killer's identity began immediately and have never stopped. The list of suspects has included everyone from Prince Albert Victor, grandson of Queen Victoria, to Lewis Carroll, author of Alice in Wonderland. More credible suspects have included Montague John Druitt, a barrister who committed suicide shortly after the Kelly murder, Aaron Kosminski, a Polish immigrant and barber who was later committed to an asylum, and George Chapman, a Polish immigrant and serial poisoner who was executed in 1903 for killing 3 wives. Each theory has its proponents and its flaws, and none has provided the definitive answer that would close this case. The investigation officially remained open until 1892, when the police files were closed and the case was considered inactive. The detectives involved took different views of their failure. Inspector Aberline believed they had come close to identifying the killer but lacked the evidence needed for prosecution. Chief Inspector Swanson privately identified Aaron Kosminski as the killer in his personal notes, but this identification was based on the testimony of a single witness who later refused to testify in court. Assistant Commissioner Robert Anderson publicly stated that the police knew the killer's identity but could not prove it in court due to the unwillingness of witnesses from the Jewish community to testify against one of their own.